What is good, cloudy people, and welcome back to the channel. With all the craziness going on surrounding Uzi after posting such cryptic pictures on IG and Eternal Atake most likely coming this month in January, today's video we'll be going over the meaning and history of Lil Uzi Vert's upcoming album, Eternal Atake. Y'all wanted more Uzi? So here it is. Let's talk about it. The entire theme of Eternal Atake began on July 16th, 2018, when Uzi tweeted out Eternal Atake. Quickly, people already assumed this was the name of his next project because it had been sufficient time since Love is Rage 2 dropped. But what does Eternal Atake even mean? Well, Uzi answered, defining the term as eternal means forever, atake means to overtake. At this point, I'm sure everyone's saying to themselves, what the f does that even mean? Forever overtake what? Later on, Uzi posted an unofficial cover art for Eternal Atake that starts to explain a little bit more behind the meaning of the album. At the bottom, the cover states, as promised, the keys to Eternal Atake are here again in Love and Rage, the UFO 2 as Lil Uzi Vert and his father 2,000 years ago, which seems like a bunch of wumbo jumbo at first glance until all the Uzi fan detectives found the original artwork that inspired the album deriving from Heaven's Gate cult. In fact, it was so similar that the cult actually pressured him with a lawsuit stating Lil Uzi Vert was infringing on their copyright and trademark imagery, and is most likely the reason he switched the unofficial cover art that he briefly shared with his fans through his IG profile picture a couple days ago, but took it down less than 2 hours later. But we'll get into the specific details of the new cover later. To confirm the fact that Eternal Atake was thematically correlated with Heaven's Gate cult, Uzi changed his profile picture on Instagram to Marshall Applewhite, the leader of the cult many years ago. A few months later, while performing, Uzi tells all of his fans that he's going to hell, and if we listen to his music, we're following right behind him too, adding to the mystery of Eternal Atake and possibly raising the nerves of superstitious fans. I don't know about y'all, but this is the shit that makes me an Uzi fan. You don't see any other artists going into this detail regarding the theme behind their album. But then again, the fans could be just creating the whole story out of thin air, because honestly, Uzi really hasn't even said much, then post pictures to make us feel like we're warmer or colder on actually finding out what the album title and cover mean. But let's continue to the history of the cult. Every Uzi fan knows about Heaven's Gate mass suicide in San Diego, but how and why did all this happen? The history of the cult starts with previously mentioned Marshall Applewhite, who is a Presbyterian minister's son who primarily studied biblical prophecies and science fiction. Keep this in mind while we continue. He teamed up with a woman named Bonnie Nettles, who also had interest in biblical prophecy, and upon their first meeting they agreed that they had met in a past life, and Bonnie claimed their meeting was foretold to her by an extraterrestrial, aka alien, in turn convincing Marshall that he had a divine assignment. They eventually concluded that they had been chosen to fulfill biblical prophecies and that they had been given higher level minds than other people. Afterwards, they formed an ideology and sought out members to support them in order to fulfill their prophecies. In the cult pamphlet, they essentially described Applewhite as the reincarnation of Jesus, characterizing all of his attributes into the prophecy, and they referred to themselves as the Two or the UFO 2 as seen in the Heaven's Gate logo and the Eternal Atake cover, the original one that is. This is where it all gets interesting. They believe they would be killed and restored to life by being transported into a spaceship, this event hereby referred to as the demonstration, which we will talk about later on when the overarching plan is executed. But before that, they had to gather as many members as possible to fund and believe in the cult. Doe and T, as Applewhite and Bonnie now refer to themselves because they believe they were possessed by extraterrestrial spirits, but more likely because they were hiding from law enforcement since they essentially kidnapped people and forced them to sell all their belongings in the name of the cult, led the almost 100 members across the country west in order to help the crew members achieve a higher evolutionary level, which apparently Doe and T had already achieved. In fact, Doe, aka Applewhite, truly believed he was the direct descendant of Jesus, and hey, he very might well be, but because of this, he was already an evolutionary kingdom level above human. In late 1996, T rented a mansion in San Diego they called the Monastery and purchased alien abduction insurance that would pay out $1 million per person for 50 people of that cult. And get this, it would also cover impregnation by aliens. About 5 months later, in March of 1997, finally, the sacred and coveted gate of heaven that was foretold in the prophecy was opening behind the trail of the comet named Hale-Bopp, as foretold by Doe and T, and 39 followers, including Applewhite, were prepared desire to transcend to the next level above humanity, wherein they all filmed farewell messages asserting a mass suicide, quote, was the only way to evacuate this Earth because a spacecraft was tailing the comet ready to scoop up the cult members' souls, but only for a limited amount of time. An interesting piece of evidence, though, was that even though T, aka Bonnie, was already enlightened and an evolutionary level above humanity and thus had a longer lifespan, she actually passed away of cancer before this, so Applewhite had to cover this and change the story a little bit to fit the necessary requirements so that people would still believe in the cult even though she had already passed away and could not physically be transported into the UFO later on. Fast forward, Applewhite convinced all of the previously mentioned members to eat poison-spiked applesauce and pudding washed down with vodka, as well as to secure a plastic bag over their heads to suffocate themselves just in case the poison didn't work. They were all dressed in the identical outfits composing of black shirts, sweatpants, brand new black and white Nike Decades shoes, and to top it all off, an armband patch that read Heaven's Gate Away Team, which people later found out was apparently a reference to Star Trek. Remember when I told you about the science fiction admiration by Applegate? Yeah, let's move on. Every member was also found to have a $5 bill and 3/4 in their pockets, in addition to a square purple cloth that covered their face and torso. The purple cloths I and many other Uzi fans believe was a sign that EA was dropping a few days ago due to his IG pictures with random girls wearing purple, although in retrospect their outfits turned out to be much different than the story of Heaven's Gate. At this point, we've summarized the entire story of Applewhite and Heaven's Gate cult, but I want to go more into detail regarding their beliefs so we can better relate it to Lil Uzi Vert and Eternal Atake. Essentially, Heaven's Gate members believed our planet Earth would be recycled, wiped clean, renewed, refurbished, and rejuvenated before 2027. That's only 7 years from now. And the only chance for human consciousness and soul to survive was to leave their human bodies before Heaven's Gate closed. Keep in mind, though, that before Bonnie passed away, the prophecy foretold that even the body physically would be transported, but since she passed away, only the soul was to transport. That is why the mass suicide was necessary in the cult after her death. The cult's beliefs were technically against suicide, however, they defined suicide a bit differently in their own context to mean to turn against the next level when it is being offered, and believe their human bodies were only vessels meant to help them on this evolutionary leveling up journey. Suicide, therefore, would be not allowing their consciousness to leave their human bodies to join the next level. Remaining alive instead of participating in the group suicide was considered suicide of their consciousness. The evolutionary level above human was foretold to be a physical place, another planet in our universe, where residents live in pure bliss and nourish themselves by absorbing pure sunlight like plants. At the next level, beings do not engage in sexual intercourse, eating, or dying, the things that make us mammalian here. Heaven's Gate believed that what the Bible calls God is actually a highly developed extraterrestrial alien. Members of Heaven's Gate believed that the evil space aliens called Luciferians falsely represented themselves to Earthlings as God and conspired to keep humans from developing by manipulating us and enslaving us. The aliens were super advanced technologically, equipped with spacecrafts, time travel, telepathy, and increased lifespan. Heaven's Gate believed that all existing religions on Earth had been corrupted by these malevolent aliens. Applewhite and Nettles taught their followers that the two of them were extraterrestrial walk-ins, possessed by extraterrestrial spirits because their original soul already vacated, in so representing themselves as beings that already achieved the evolutionary level up. More specifically, Applewhite claimed the extraterrestrial spirit that occupied his body was the same one that occupied Jesus over 2,000 years ago. Applewhite and Nettles also taught the ancient astronaut hypothesis that stated that the extraterrestrials that visit Earth in the distant past planted the seeds of humanity millions of years ago and were coming on the date of the demonstration to reap their harvest of only the evolutionarily evolved humans to join the ranks of their UFO crews. Those not chosen to advance transhuman states, aka everyone who did not join Heaven's Gate cult, will be left to wallow in a corrupt world ending before 2027. Now, I know what you're all thinking. This all sounds made up, but I guarantee you all of this information came from the Heaven's Gate official website in which it describes its beliefs and practices. But the real question is, how and why is Uzi comparing his album to Heaven's Gate? He's not convincing any of us all to commit suicide. Uzi is obviously not serious about the relation between the cult and Eternal Atake. However, there are similarities in the cult-like following he's accrued and the storyline he's attempting to portray with the album. Firstly, if you're watching this video, you cannot deny deny the overwhelming amount of stans Uzi has. Why else would any of us care this much to click on this video and watch up until this point, trying to look into the deep meaning behind Eternal Atake? But he deserves it considering the theme he created for all of us to look into was so interesting. Other rappers would just name their album Views and sit on a massive cruise ship. Joking, I fuck with Drake, so don't mess with him like that. But if you haven't already caught on, Uzi is Applewhite, leading us to the next level of human evolution. But since his music and lyrics tend to be more dark, he's taking us through the gateway of hell, not heaven. Uzi knows his following would die for him, and he publicly related his fans to a cult similar to Heaven's Gate when he announced we are all going to hell with him. Again, just like how all of Applewhite's cult followers followed him to the UFO transport for Heaven's Gate. Uzi is just waiting for Hell's Gate to open so he can finally bless us with Eternal Atake, and it's most likely coming as soon as this month with all the pre-album rollout drama recently. So stay tuned. And with that concludes the video. Make sure to like and subscribe to keep up to the date on Uzi news and other rapper conspiracies. Let me know in the comments if you think Eternal Atake is actually dropping this month. Peace out, cloudy people. Know what I'm saying?